It's a new year, which means it's time to reset plans and expectations. And for me, I have to change how I'm thinking and change how I'm acting when it comes to Cards HQ, Sports Card Investor, and beyond. Because what those companies needed from me last year isn't what they'll need from me this year. I'll explain. This episode is brought to you by Arena Club. Arena Club is an innovative platform featuring grading and authentication, vaulting, and digital pack openings. Be sure to check out the amazing items up for auction right now at Arena Club. From rare cards to top-tier collectibles, there's something for you at Arena Club. Download the Arena Club app today by searching Arena Club in the App Store on your phone, and then use promo code SCI for 10% off your first purchase of cards at Arena Club. Hello, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Geoff Wilson Show. I am fresh back from a little vacation over in Italy. I took the family over there for New Year's, had an absolutely wonderful time. Have you, by the way, listening, been to Italy before? It is probably my favorite country to visit. I have been 4 times. I had to count up the trips in my mind. I've been 4 times over the last 15 years. I think I've hit all of the different major parts of the country. And each trip has been absolutely magnificent. This one was my first one taking my kids. My wife and I had been on all the previous ones. So we just did the basics this time. We did Rome and we did Venice. But it was fun showing it off to the kids. And of course they loved the food and they had a good time. And the historical stuff kept them interested just long enough. I knew that it would get boring for them after a little while, but we had their attention every time we'd go to a new historical site. We had their attention for an hour or maybe 2, and then it would start to wane, but it was enough to really give them a taste of the culture over there and a taste of history. And we ate a ton of gelato and a ton of pasta and a ton of pizza, and we had an absolutely wonderful time, as anyone does, I think, whenever they go over to Italy. But I'm back. And by the way, that flight was a good time to reset. I actually had the misfortune, but maybe it turned into the fortune, that on one of the legs, the plane going overseas, my seat was all messed. It didn't have any power, and so I couldn't. I didn't have my laptop properly charged before the flight, and I was depending on the plane power. The TV was down, so I had nothing. I didn't have a laptop. My phone was dying. The TV wasn't working. So I basically had solitude for many hours. And it actually was a pretty good opportunity to just sit and reflect. And sit and reflect I did. And I took advantage of that opportunity. I took some notes, did some thinking, thought a lot about 2025, thought a lot about 2024, and thought a lot about the future. And some of those thoughts are what I'm sharing with you right now. I've never been big on New Year's resolutions. I think that people use New Year's resolutions a little bit as a crutch. It makes them feel good to say oh, okay, we're on the new year, so I'm going to start working out more, or work on my side business or whatever it is. But New Year's resolutions typically fade off after a month or 2. It's, building those types of things into your daily habits, making them part of your daily routine, and not having it stop and start when a year starts is really the better way to go. And there's plenty of studies that have proven that. So I've never been big on New Year's resolutions, but what I am big on is the fact that the new year is a natural opportunity to step back and look at the big picture. Because when that, when the year turns over from 2024 to 2025, it's a natural reset of just taking a step back moment over the holidays, over the break, and just kind of looking reflecting, taking some reflection time of where things went over the last year and where you would like to see things go over the year ahead. So I'm more big on reflecting and looking forward rather than setting particular resolutions necessarily. But I do think that reflection time is really, really important. And I was able to get a lot of that, which was really great.
And so I'm going to share today some of my reflections, some of my thinking, and what I think this year and years beyond will hopefully bring. And it's really important. This is a really critical year that we're entering here in my life and for my businesses. And I'm sharing this with you today in part because I want to put this all out on the record so you can hold me accountable. I want to put this out there and share how I'm thinking because I want to make sure this year, one of my big things is I've really got to think big. And I've really got to think long term. I've got to think bigger and I've got to think longer term than I ever have in my life before because I'm afforded in a very unique, maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to do it right now. And so I'm saying all of this today because I want to get this out on the record, if for no other purpose than to hold myself accountable and make sure that I don't shrink my thinking and stop paying attention to the really big long-term picture because I really need to do that. So this year is so important because of what happened in 2024, because of what happened last year. So obviously last year, one of the biggest things for me was Cards HQ opening. And that opened back at the beginning of February of 2024. Cards HQ passed all of our expectations for 2024. I expected big things from the shop. I thought the shop was going to do well. I thought the shop was going to be a big success. The shop did way better than what even my highest expectations were for retail. We still have a little ways to go when it comes to, live selling, breaking online, although that stuff's been growing really quickly as well. But for retail, the retail side really passed even my highest expectations of what was possible. Super great to see. Carter, Ryan did just an absolutely fantastic job. We got a great leadership team here at Cards HQ, but Carter and Ryan in particular, my partners in that business, just so much dedication and heart they put into it, and it shows in the results that Cards HQ achieved in 2024. So that's really important as I think about the future. Sports Card Investor, best year ever for the views of our content. More views on YouTube, more followers and engagement on social. Best year we've ever had in terms of all of our Sports Card Investor content. Website traffic, the highest it's ever been. I've got a great team over there as well. I've got Kelly and Charles and Adam help lead that group. We got a ton of talented people throughout the organization. Our production team, our social team, our marketing team, all part of Sports Card Investor. All did an absolutely outstanding job and set records. So that's cool. And that, once again, that's a foundation that now sets me up for the rest of this conversation about starting to think a little bit bigger. Market movers and our product group doubled in size over the course of 2024. Our number of market mover subscribers doubled. That's a huge growth, monumental growth to double your subscriber base in a year when we already had a lot of subscribers going into the year. Big numbers. All of our numbers last year on the product side, from market movers to the Sports Card Investor app to our website, big impressive numbers. And it changed my perception there of what's possible. Because to be honest, going into 2024, and I've discussed this with Teapot, the head of the product team. You guys know Teapot. He did a fabulous job. But by the way, all the guys on our product team did a fabulous job. Nick, who leads marketing for us, fabulous job as well. I discussed this with Teapot that my expectations of what product could achieve, what the ceiling was a little bit more limited than what I now believe it to be. And other aspects of what we do here, such as selling sponsorships, put up record numbers in 2024 as well. But I say all of this not to brag or celebrate, what happened in the past too much. I really say all of this to set the foundation for now what needs to change in 2025. And, there's a quote by Jeff Bezos, a famous quote, where he once said, if everything you do needs to work on a 3-year time horizon, then you're competing against a lot of people. But if you're willing to invest on a 7-year time horizon, you're now competing against just a fraction of those people. Just by lengthening the time horizon, you can engage in endeavors that you otherwise could never pursue. That resonates with me right now. And here's why it resonates. 2024 was the first year where I felt, as an organization, and not just Sports Card Investor and Cards HQ and Market Movers, but honestly, the sports card industry as a whole. 2024 was the first year where I felt it was a year of stable growth, and it was a foundational year that could really be worked off of to look long term. The years prior to that were too up and down. I mean, 2019, 2020, 2021 was this rocket ship to the moon that in part was fueled by the pandemic. Then all of a sudden, things are completely out of control in terms of card prices in the market, and the pandemic starts to lift, and then things start to really rapidly drop. The second half of 2021 and 2022 and 2023, everyone's scared of sports cards, and prices are falling, and people aren't really putting money in it, and companies aren't investing in it the way that they were. Well, 2024 was the first year where it felt like everything kind of got back to normal, and we started growing as an entire industry again. And there's a lot of factors as to why that was, and I've talked about them on other shows. I'm not going to get into that today, but the bottom line is 2024, in my opinion, was a year that was a foundational year. And when I look at the industry overall, and when I look at how my entities performed in 2024, it gives me confidence to think not 3 years out or 1 year out or 3 days out, which is how I've had to think at times over the last few years, but it gives me confidence to think 7 years out, as Jeff Bezos, said in that quote. And that requires some big mental shifts. It's a really cool opportunity. And it's in some ways kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. I didn't have that luxury the last few years with Sports Card Investor, and obviously Cards HQ wasn't even open. But we were in crazy entrepreneurial mode, ups and downs, planning for weeks ahead or months ahead, not even planning for years ahead, because we didn't quite know, how things were going to look a few years from that point in time, right? And previous to Sports Card Investor, other businesses that I've run, that I've been involved in, never quite had the luxury to ever think 7 years out. Like, for example, the main business that I ran for many, many years, I sold it earlier in 2024, was a digital agency, 352. So we developed websites and software and digital marketing. And I ran that company I started that company when I was in college. I ran the company for 26 years. So it was around for a long time. And we did, we did great. We had years where we were, well over $10 million in revenue. We got up as high as like 90 something employees at our peak. And the company did well over the course of many, many years. But the agency world is one that is in constant change. What your clients need from you today, the services you provide today, the technology you work on today, the marketing techniques and campaigns you produce today, all of that's going to be different in, 7 years for sure, but even in 3 years. Like, as an agency, you kind of have to adapt to the moment. You have to adapt to the time. You have to adapt to what your clients need then. How are you most relevant to your clients at that moment? Today, a lot of agencies are helping clients with AI, for example. But 7 years ago, no agency would have planned that 7 years from then they would be helping clients with AI, because that wasn't even on the radar of, things that people were going to be, it was going to be the hot button topics, 7 years ago. And that constantly changes. And so you can't really look 7 years out as an agency. You can't even really look 3 years out as an agency. It's very difficult. So that was my main bread and butter for many years. And I never had that opportunity to really think 7 years out and think long-term strategic. And then with Sports Card Investor, because of all the changes and the ups and downs, I didn't have that opportunity the first few years. We were just in entrepreneurial, growth and fight and, try to make it through the next week and the next month mode. But 2024 was different. It was a lot different. And now I get that luxury and I get that opportunity, and I'm super excited about it, and I'm ready to take it on. But in order to take it on, it's going to require some mental shifts for me based upon how I've traditionally thought and operated. So the first is quite simply, I got to start thinking and planning long-term more. I am a true serial startup entrepreneur. I've started 16 different businesses, I believe, over the course of, the last 25 years. And some have gone on to become really successful. I've had some big exits. Others have died off and have been failures. But through every single one of those businesses, my approach, what I brought to the table was kind of a scrappy, grinded out, hardworking, entrepreneurial startup mindset. That's what I brought to the table with every single one of those businesses. And that mindset works really, really well in the early stages of a business. That's what businesses need in their early years as they're getting off the ground and starting to enter growth phases. But as businesses become more stable and start to be able to look long term, they need a little bit less of the entrepreneur, and they need a little bit more of the systems and operations. And so as the CEO, as the leader, I got to start thinking systems and operations and goals and plans and outcomes for years out in order to realize the potential. If I continue to think in the moment, if I continue to think, this is what's needed most in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, and if I'm ignoring where things could be in 5 years, then I'm not going to be able to achieve as big of a long-term success as I would like. And so that's a shift that I got to make this year. That affects how I think, that affects how I plan, that affects how I resource, that affects how I act on a day-to-day, how I operate on a day-to-day, how I delegate. There's a lot that goes into that. Delegation, that last word I just said, that's a big deal, right? You can't scale without it. And traditionally, as a serial startup entrepreneur, my default operating method is to take a lot on my back. And my default operating method is I got it. And I'm going to fill in the gaps, and I'm going to play chameleon and work across the organization and advance things where they need to be advanced. Well, that doesn't work if you're going to, grow the company to be many times what it is today and think 7 years out. Because if you're thinking 7 years out and tons of growth and scale, then you've really got to think systems, and you got to think operating plans, and you got to think a lot of people in a lot of key positions to execute that for you and with you, instead of you being the catalyst and putting the weight of that on your back to try to advance the ball forward, because that's going to become less and less effective the more the organization as a whole grows. And by the way, speaking of growth, between Cards HQ and Sports Card Investor, we have over 75 employees now. That's starting to become a really large number, right? And I mean, I would expect that as 2025 goes on, we'll hit 100 employees, sometime this year. That will probably occur. Or we'll get at least very close to it, I would think, this year. And then what happens when we start to open up other locations for Cards HQ, and what happens when we start to scale in other areas, which we've got a lot of big plans to do, and what happens when Sports Card Investor starts to scale into other forms of content and doing different types of things, and our product team starts to scale as Market Movers doubles its subscriber base again, and all these things. Okay, like we could be looking at 200 employees, 300 employees, 500 employees at some point in the future. That changes how you have to act and think and plan and behave and organize and operate as the CEO, as the entrepreneur of the company. And so this year for me is a lot about transition into that. It's a lot about let's think 7 years out and let's realize what's possible. and how do we transition what we're doing into that. One thing I'm really excited about doing is what's called a 10X exercise. I'm really excited about doing this with my team, and we have a company retreat coming up for Sports Card Investor in early February. And this is what I want the focus of that company retreat to be. And I need to do this separately with our Cards HQ team, because the Cards HQ team won't be at the Sports Card Investor retreat, but we need to do probably a Cards HQ retreat for the leadership team at Cards HQ. And we probably need to do this exact same thing. And the 10X exercise is a exercise for entrepreneurs that's been around for a while. I don't know who first came up with the concept. It's nothing, it's nothing particularly novel, but it's an effective concept that gets you thinking differently. And what it simply is you spend some time with your leadership team. You think about your business today in its current state, and then you say, how do we 10X every aspect of our business? How would we 10X Cards HQ's revenue? How would we 10X, Cards HQ's customer base, Cards HQ's followers, the brand recognition of Cards HQ, the number of stores, the reach of Cards HQ, the online presence of Cards HQ, the product mix of Cards HQ? How do we 10X all of it? How do we do it? It's a big question, right? And this is why this question is so important, because a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs think, what are we going to do this year? Cards HQ is not going to 10X this year. Sports Card Investor is not going to 10X this year. We may see, maybe we see 50% growth. That'd be great, right? But that's 0.5X or 1.5X, right? Not 10X. So a lot of people, when they're doing their planning, you're always just planning based upon the year ahead. You're always just planning based upon what growth is reasonably possible in the next 12 months. Well, 1.5X, that would be great. Everyone would be happy with that. So you're always planning incremental. You're never planning revolutionary, right? You're never planning complete, overhaul, complete change, something completely different. You're never thinking that way. You're never thinking that big. Most don't. That's why the 10X exercise is important, because it forces you to. Because when you sit down and you think about, oh my gosh, we're not talking about 1.5X growth. We're talking about 10X growth. What does that look like? Then all of a sudden you start to think, man, we'd have to completely do a lot of things differently. Completely. How do you buy inventory for Cards HQ at a level that is 10X what we do today? Woo. I mean, it's got to be a lot different than what we're doing today, right? We could scale what we're doing today to take it up by 1.5X to satisfy the needs for the next 12 months, but we can't do it by 10X. It would require a totally different approach. And that's the whole point of the exercise. What is that approach? And you start really thinking through that. And then you start thinking, well, maybe that's what we need to start working towards. Because if we're, once again, thinking 7 years out, well, Cards HQ could 10X in the next 7 years, right? So maybe we need to start putting those operational plans in place now and slowly working towards those so that we could 10X Cards HQ over the next 7 years. What about Sports Card Investor, right? We have 350,000 subscribers on YouTube today. What does it look like to have 3.5 million subscribers on YouTube? That's a tough question to answer. I can tell you how we can go from 350,000 to 500,000. We could do that. We could figure that out because we've seen that type of growth before. We know what videos work and what people will subscribe to, and we can certainly grow incrementally. But how do you go from 350 to 3.5 million? It takes a little bit of a rethinking of the type of content that we're producing and what audience we're trying to hit with that content, right? So, I mean, that's kind of an interesting exercise. How do you take your social accounts? How do you go on Instagram from 150,000 to 1.5 million? right? How do we take market movers to the point where it has over 100,000 members? We have over 10,000 today. How do we go to over 100,000? How do we get to 150,000? It's a much bigger question, right? And it takes different thought processes, different behaviors, different challenges that you would have to overcome in order to do all of those things. Every aspect of the business, like with Cards HQ, I mentioned buying. Yeah, buying would be a challenge, but so would every other aspect of the business. How do you manage employees? How do you manage inventory? How do you manage loss prevention? How do you manage cash flow? How do you manage human resources? How do you manage, scheduling and benefits, and just every aspect of the business has to be completely rethought if you're going to be 10 times bigger than you are today. It doesn't have to be rethought to be 1.5 times bigger, but it's really got to be rethought to be 10 times bigger. And that's the beauty of the exercise. And so we have the opportunity to think that way today. We didn't really have the opportunity to think that way a couple years ago because things were too topsy-turvy in the market. And I didn't have the long-term confidence that I do today. I always thought these last 5 years, I always had the belief that sports cards were going to be great in the long run and the hobby and the market was going to be great in the long run. But the short run was a bit of a roller coaster. I mean, these last few years have been wild in the sports card hobby. Some good, some bad, but it's been wild overall. And 2024 gave me that foundational confidence to really now say, okay, now we have the opportunity to think 10x and to put together the 7-year plan to actually 10x. It's a really unique opportunity, and it's something that we have to take full advantage of. So that's what I'm going to put to my team when we get together for our Sports Card Investor Company retreat in early February. I'm going to ask my employees, how do we 10x all of this? How do we 10x it? How do we 10x our SCI content? How do we 10x our Market Movers members? How do we 10x everything we're doing from an SCI perspective? And I've got to ask those same questions to my Cards HQ leadership team as well. We got to take some time. We got to get away. We got to answer those same questions because I think the answers and the process of coming up with those answers is going to be really compelling. And I think some really good stuff is going to come from it that will hopefully have a wonderful long-term impact on not just our business, but the hobby overall. One thing I know I will need for sure in order to help the company think long-term and operate and act long-term is I'm going to need more help around me. And I know that I'm going to need to add some team members who can help support me and work alongside me to grow the company. So I'm already planning some of that. I'm already planning a couple of roles that I'm going to be adding in the near future that will then provide more bandwidth for myself and provide more effectiveness for me and provide more bandwidth for the overall leadership of the organization so that we can really start to think long-term and take advantage. And I got to just continue to work on myself. I got to continue to work on my approach and how I think and how I plan and how I organize and really shift into not being a bottleneck and not having too much on my back, but rather empowering those around me, building the right organizational structure, having the right people in place in all elements, and pushing my team to think long-term, empowering them to build long-term and lay out a plan and a vision, work with my team to create that plan and vision, and hold each other accountable to work towards it. There's a lot of work to do. It's fun to sit around and think about what's possible. And recording this video has me excited because it's such a cool opportunity to be able to think big like this. But recording this video and putting this out on the record and sharing this with you and sharing this with my team also means that now we got to get to work and get it done. And that, of course, is the hard part. But that is the part that also has me energized and also has me excited to go and excited to look back at this video 7 years from now and say, wow, we really did it. We really 10x'd Cards HQ and Sports Card Investor and Market Movers and everything else we're involved in. That would be a pretty incredible moment in time. That would make the journey real special and really worth it. So I hope we're at that point in 7 years. And between now and then, we're rolling up our sleeves, we're thinking big, and we're going to work as hard as can be to make it happen. All right, those are all my thoughts today. If you've got any thoughts or feedback for me, let me know in the comments. And just a reminder that these Geoff Wilson shows, these full-length shows are available on YouTube under the Geoff Wilson Show channel, but they're also available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So make sure you are subscribed to the Geoff Wilson Show everywhere. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you soon with our next one. Take care.